Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coalition Building 101. Super excited that you want to learn about how we can build community for collective power for any of the campaigns or projects you're doing, specifically probably around voter engagement. So my name is Catherine. I am the Partnerships Manager at the SLSV Coalition. We are a national network that works with nearly 400 organizations across the country on how to increase student voter participation and democratic engagement on all college campuses. Which is just a little bit about us. So today we're going to go through basically the purpose and why it's so important to build a coalition and how does it integrate into other parts of the work that you're doing. What are the different kinds of coalition partners? And then we're going to go a little bit into brass tacks of what are the tangible steps to build a coalition. And lastly, we're going to do a breakout session so you can practice doing a one-on-one, recruiting someone into your coalition. So to start off, why build a coalition? Why is it so important? There are three things that we've identified that are overarching to any of the points that you may be thinking about. The first is coalitions are building collective power, right? One organization can do a lot, but having a community of groups who care about the similar issues adds validity to your project, as well as brings in so many different voices to ensure that your work is truly encompassing of the communities that you serve. The second piece is creating community, right? This work is tough and this work is hard. And if you're creating a campaign, it's not something that gets done in a week. It's something that is over the course of a long period of time. And so creating that community space with other people who care about it similarly is a validator for your organizers. But then also it's just like knowing that there are so many other folks who can be sharing the wealth of work. And so you don't have the burden of trying to accomplish this campaign on your own. And the lastly is sharing your resources. So there are three kinds of resources: people, time, and money. And so how are you working with your community and other coalition partners to ensure that they're all supporting your work and sharing your resources? So for example, a student group may have a lot of people to do it, a voter registration drive, for example, but they don't have the resources to table, they don't have literally a table, they may not have food, they may not be able to print the forms. So they might work in their coalition with the Center for Leadership, where they have one overworked staff member, but they can pay for snacks and like pizzas for the volunteers as well as printing materials. So just using your coalition's strengths and resources that they have an abundance of to essentially, go through all of the different tactics that accomplishes the mission of your coalition. So before we go into more of like the steps to join it, we want to talk a little bit about how your coalition can create an equitable plan for you, right? Part of creating a coalition, that whole building community piece, is that you're trying to get 100% engagement on your campus, right? And so using that as a way that we can create equity is super important. And so to kind of level set, let's talk a little bit about the difference between equality and equity. So you all might have seen this before somewhere about this is what equality and equity is, right? Equality means everyone gets the same, where equity means everyone gets the same outcomes, right? So equalizing the circumstances that they have. So giving people the resources that they need to register to vote, for example, or to actually go to the polling location. So for example, like a form of equity is getting transportation to the polling locations for those who don't have cars, right? And so trying to think through how you are also just thinking about, are you achieving equality, getting everyone the same resource, right? So for example, like giving out like palm cards of like how to register to vote to everyone in English, right? That's equality. Getting everyone, that can get you a high rate of folks to get the information. However, equity could be, hey, like we have a high population of students who speak Chinese or Spanish. So we're also going to have these palm cards in different languages. And so that's thinking through like the circumstances of your community. But, as you're looking at this, right, you see that, everyone's on the same box, right? Which the main problem here is that you're short, right? It's a you problem, right? Where we know that that's not how systemic oppression works, right? The other piece of it is that the fence is the same. So the barrier of entry, or like the barriers to stop someone from doing something, is the same, which we also know is not true. We also see that the ground is on the same level, right? That everyone starts from the same place. They just, just have a little more push, which also we know that not everyone starts in that same place. So when you're thinking about equality and equity, we have to think through it in this kind of lens, knowing and understanding that not everyone starts in the same place. Not everyone has the same ease to overcome, quote unquote, the fence or whatever is happening to them. And that that the people, it's not the people's problem, it's about the societal problems of like enforcing onto the people, right? And ultimately, as you're building your campaigns, you can think through like, how are you achieving equality, right? Like, how can you achieve getting the most people to be part of it as possible? Because that's what you can do right now. You could be achieving equity, right? So for example, back to the polling location piece, like instead of getting transportation to the polling location, getting an on-campus polling location, removing that barrier of entry, which is about justice, right? Tearing down the system that is oppressing the community to begin with, right? Like removing like the transportation problem when you get an on-campus polling location is a way that we're achieving justice. And so thinking through, what is your coalition fighting for, right? Is it fighting for equality? Is it fighting for equity? Or is it fighting for justice? And it's completely fine if you're fighting for different things at different moments. This might be your first time building a coalition with an equity model or any equality, equity, or justice model. This could be your 5th year, right? So just seeing what you want, what is your purpose, which we'll talk about, and then just continuing to push yourself up that ladder. You might be at equality right now, getting everyone to be on the same page. You might be at equity, trying to think through what are your turnout rates and why are people voting at lower rates, and trying to address using unique strategies to accomplish that. Or you can be at the point where you're seeking justice, where you're trying to identify what are the things that are stopping your community from voting? How are we going to tear down those barriers to begin with? So now a guide. Here are the steps to create a coalition. To start off, think about your purpose. Why are you creating a coalition? What are you doing, right? What are some of the goals that you want to do? And at the end of the day, when you are nice and old, or you're a couple years down the road, you can say, I accomplished this. Like, what does success look like? Where is your end goal? And granted, that end goal could be a moving target, but trying to think through in the beginning, what are you trying to achieve? The second piece is power map, right? Who do you want to be part of your coalition, and how do you get access to them, right? So think through your stakeholders. Do you want the Black Student Union to be part of your organization or your coalition? Do you want to have your Dean of Student Affairs to be part of your coalition? Thinking through who are your stakeholders and who are the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 priority, right? So basically, like, think about who your coalition, who you want to be part of your coalition. Why do you want them to be part of the coalition, other than like, I think they would be good? So like identifying a purpose, like I want to have the president's office to be part of our coalition because it adds validity to what we're doing, as well as they have the power to do some of these bigger pieces, like sending an email to the entire campus. And if we can get buy-in, then it makes it easier. That's why you should have like that's the reason why we want to have them, right? Defining why you think they're important to be part of that space. In both aspects, right? That one, like they can help us, but then also you can tell them like you being part of this coalition shows that the president's office cares about students' rights to vote, right? And then like thinking through how do you access them. Not everyone can just be a knock on a door away. And so thinking through like who are the people to get you to that person you need. And then prioritize it, right? You might have 50 people on your list to join your coalition, but sometimes you just need to focus on who are your top 5 candidates. And then once you get there, then you can go through your 6 through 10 candidates. And just going through that process and not feeling like you have to get to everyone at the same time. There are different things coalition partners can do. So when you're thinking about like, what are you prioritizing and like, how do they support your coalition? You have the top level of groups, right? The people who are making the decisions. They're the ones who are doing your strategy, right? Called the decision makers, very tight group of folks who are essentially developing that strategy to send to the larger coalition. The second are the people who are helping you develop your programming. And granted, I would also preface to say that people could be doing multiple things. They could be a power builder and a programmer and a decision maker, right? But just defining these can help you organize your thoughts on why are you bringing this person into the coalition and what can they be doing while they're here. So programmers can be the ones building content, setting up your voter registration day events, or like creating a town hall or doing whatever, all of those different things. Power builders are the people who are bringing folks into your coalition or bringing volunteers into your projects. And so all of these different folks are the ones who are like, I don't have time to help build content, but what I can do is I run a volunteer service club and I can help people volunteer for this. And then fourth are the outreach, the people who are sharing your message. These are the people who can be disseminating all of your programming content to folks. So for example, a super low-hanging fruit for a coalition partner that we've seen is like people working with the food service or like the cafeteria, right? Where they can put little cards on all of the tables so people can know about their upcoming voter events, right? They're about people who are sharing the message of your coalition. Developing your ask is the third piece of creating a coalition. When you're thinking about developing your ask, think about three different things. So basically, what are you asking when you've already decided to reach out to your stakeholder? One, what are the goals of your coalition that you could be sharing to help people kind of like understand what you're doing here? The second is define your expectations. So what are you expecting from them to be part of your coalition? And then also, what should they be expecting from you? And then the third is own your vision. So basically, like there is a lot of coalition partners in this work. It shouldn't be a one voice or one mic, one diva situation. Your coalition members will help adapt and translate and change your strategy as well as your mission, because they are the ones who are on the ground listening to their communities. And so keep hold of what is your end goal, right? But just being willing to have an open conversation about like how that your goals and mission can be aligned with everyone else. As you are developing your ask, as I mentioned before, think about what they can offer you versus also what you offer them. So highlight it, right? How can the coalition help achieve your goals, right? So if you see alignment with like the environmental club and how they are trying to have environmental policies being pushed, saying like, hey, like if you want to have conversations about like policy issues, of course, in a nonpartisan way, like that means about you having to register voters and making sure that our students are active voters. Let's have a conversation here. And so you're aligning their mission with your mission of your coalition. And then like, what does that gain from like that collab, right? Then the second piece is anticipate what people are worried about, right? So like why, like for example, they're like, we're already doing, you know, this campaign and that campaign, why should we be part of your coalition? So like having like, this is what we're really about, this is what we're asking for, and just knowing that you have a scalable ask for folks, talking about like, you know, it could be like, hey, like we just want to see if you can like post this on your social media to see if we can get more volunteers, or it could be like, hey, like can you be join our meetings, and so you can see which ones we can be helpful for. So just having like small conversations and trying to frame your ask in a realistic way to the needs of their club or organization. And so the other piece of this is just as you're framing, thinking of more little bit of logistics of framing a conversation is just knowing your audience, right? The way that you ask the dance club to join your coalition and how you reach out to the athletics club or the athletics department on your campus is radically different, right? And so thinking through how are you framing that pitch in a very intentional way in which they know that they are being personally reached out to be part of your coalition. And with that, it means you have to use accessible language. Talk to people in a way that they understand. If you use like frou-frou language, like we are building voter access on campus through like developing strategies to blah, 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 they're gonna like tune out. They don't know what that means for the most part. Some folks may. And so just being like, hey, we wanna make sure every student who can vote can be part of that process, and making sure that they know that their voice means something, right? So just using words that make sense to the folks that you're talking to. And being honest, right? If you're starting a coalition, you can share that. You can be like, hey, we're just building it out. We want to hear your feedback. Or you can be like, we're super established. We have all of these things going on. And so just letting people know where you are in the process is totally fine. Now you've seen it go from blue to red, which means, hey, you have your plan, you have the people you're going to reach out to, you know what you're going to ask them. And so now you have to go out and ask them, right? Create your outreach plan, divide and conquer between all of your volunteers or current members of your coalition to try to get more coalition partners, and recruit for as long as you find it important. And recruiting can happen throughout the process as you're building other materials. A lot of the recruitment should be recruiting towards a meeting or an activity, so people are doing something. And so in your first meeting, outline your purpose. Why are you here? Also, like, who's in the room? Why are they here? Why is there such intentionality? Like, show the intentionality of you pulling these communities together. And then plan and communicate your timeline. So you can be like, hey, this is our goal. Here's our XYZ for the year. And then like, we're still trying to fill out this parts of the action plan. What do you all think? And then trying to develop your communication strategy to ensure that everyone is on the same page. So we've talked a lot about what you can be doing for the coalition. Super easy, right? But just to know, as you are building this, there are a lot of obstacles, and it's a lot harder than you think, but it's totally worth it. So as you're thinking about these things, just know that creating buy-in or getting people to join your coalition and stay and care about your coalition for the whole period of your campaign is really hard. Keeping people invested is super difficult. So just thinking through what are small wins you could be doing, what are ways that you can have small asks from folks so then they can stay involved is super helpful. Some logistics pieces to it, right? Like, no one wants to talk about like, what time are we getting the food in for this event? But it's super important, and ensuring that you assign someone or have someone responsible about dealing with the nitty gritties that some like visionaries may not want to talk about. Also, it can be extremely helpful in keeping the truck moving. Third is communication, as I mentioned before. Keeping everyone on the same page is extremely difficult, especially as your coalition partners are growing. We work with 400 coalition partners, and let me tell you, getting everyone on the same page, really difficult. And so just thinking through what is the medium that you're talking to them, email, Slack, text messages, Facebook group, and making sure that they're consistently checking that medium. And so maybe sometimes you'll also have to adapt that medium to make sure that you are hitting everyone's screens. And then lastly, like, keep evaluating your progress, right? Oftentimes people wait till the end of the campaign to be like, did we do it? How did we do? But you should be thinking like monthly or quarterly, like, how are you doing? Are you still hitting your measures to achieve your goal? Does your goal need to move to adapt to the changing landscape that you're living in, right? So for example, we're living right now in a COVID world, and in COVID-19, like, people had a goal of, having an X amount of in-person events, but that had to adapt for your changing climate. So you've gone through all of these different pieces. You learned about equity, equality, and justice in building a coalition. You learned about what are the steps to join a coalition and like how to create one, and as well as the obstacles you're dealing with. But now we want to talk a little bit about how can you go about this, right? So we're going to do a quick role-playing activity. So we have 3 people we want you to recruit to your coalition, and I trust the organizer to choose how you all want to break up into 3 different groups or 6 different groups to choose which person you want to talk to. You have Sarah Science, Fabio Faculty, and Oliver Orientation, who is 3 really cool people you'll be learning about in your papers. And basically, as a group, you should be framing your pitch to them. And this is a conversation. when you're developing an ask from like one-on-ones, it's not a monologue, right? You can't just be, having a grand old time talking about everything. Just thinking through how are you building a conversation and framing some of the things that we talked about, right? Talking about why you are a coalition, talking about what's in it for them and highlighting why it's so important and trying to anticipate the challenges that they may face. And you, after a few minutes, will work with the organizer to practice actually sitting there and going through a conversation with someone. So make sure you assign one person to be your organizer to talk to Sarah, Fabio, or Oliver, and ask the organizer if you have any questions. I am super excited to hear back from all of your different role-playing activities. Thank you so much for being part of learning about how to build a coalition. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to the Students Learn Students Vote Coalition. Thank you.